You won't believe how a chance meeting in my garden with the old paper boy from down the road sparked a sweet, unexpected connection that made my heart feel young again. I'm Linda. And this is the cozy story of how a simple surprise bloomed into something special at 60. My name is Linda, and I live in a quiet town just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Life has slowed down since I turned 60, that I've come to appreciate the pace after decades of working in education and raising two boys who now have children of their own. My garden has become my sanctuary. It's where I go to think, to breathe, and lately, to feel something again. That morning was like any other. The sun was already high, casting warm patches of light between the shadows of the maple trees that lined my backyard. The soft hum of bees danced among the lavender bushes, and the scent of fresh soil lingered in the air. I was down on my knees, wearing my old straw hat and a pair of gloves that had seen better days, gently planting a row of marigolds along the border. I didn't hear him at first. I was humming to myself, lost in the rhythm of digging and patting the soil down, when suddenly I felt a presence behind me. Not threatening, just unexpected. Those are going to look beautiful when they bloom. I turned quickly, heart thumping just a little faster than it should have for a woman my age. There he was. Tom. He used to be the paper boy in the neighborhood years ago, back when his voice was still cracking, and he rode a red bicycle with one pedal slightly bent. But now he wasn't a boy. He was a man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered, tanned from what I assumed was outdoor work, and carrying the kind of gentle confidence that you don't expect to find in someone that young. "Tom, I haven't seen you in years," I said, brushing the dirt off my knees as I stood. He smiled. "Yeah, I was visiting my mom down the road, thought I'd take a walk. And well, I saw you out here." I laughed, unsure why I suddenly felt the need to fix my hair or tug at the hem of my gardening shirt. "You surprised me, but it's good to see you." We stood there for a moment, just taking each other in, not in a romantic way. Not yet. But in that deeply human way of recognizing someone from your past who has grown into something new. He offered to help with the last few plants, and I didn't say no. He grabbed a small trowel from the gardening bag and knelt beside me. For a while, we worked in silence, occasionally exchanging little stories, him about his work as a landscape designer, me about my grandkids and how much I loved this garden. Then, as he handed me a marigold plant, our hands brushed. It was brief, innocent, but it sent a shiver up my spine that I didn't expect. I looked up, and his eyes met mine, not intense, not heavy, but sincere and maybe just a little curious. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" he asked softly. I swallowed, suddenly aware of the stillness around us. The birds had gone quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. "Sometimes," I said truthfully, "but I find ways to fill the quiet." He nodded, like he understood something deeper than the words themselves. We finished the planting, and as we stood, he wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "I'd love to stop by again, if that's okay, maybe bring some seeds of my own." I smiled, feeling something stern inside me I hadn't felt in years. "I'd like that, Tom. I really would." He walked away down the garden path, sunlight catching the edges of his shoulders as he turned back with a final wave, and I stood there among my marigolds and lavender, wondering why my heart was still fluttering like it used to when I was 20. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a nice visit. But something told me this was the beginning of something I hadn't expected. And maybe, just maybe, something I needed. The next few days passed slowly, in the way they tend to when you're waiting for something but pretending you're not. I told myself I hadn't expected him to actually come back after all. People say those things all the time. "I'll stop by," or "let's catch up sometime." And most of the time they don't mean it. But part of me hoped he did. It was Thursday afternoon when I saw him again, I was trimming the rose bushes near the fence, wearing the same old gloves and trying not to look like I'd been glancing down the road every few hours. I heard footsteps, confident, unhurried, and turned just as Tom pushed open the gate with his elbow, holding a small tray of seedlings in both hands. "Brought the seeds I promised," he said, grinning. I felt warmth bloom in my chest, the kind that made me stand a little taller. "You always show up with plants, don't you?" "Occupational hazard," he said, setting the tray on the table near the back porch. "These are heirloom tomatoes, figured you might have space for them." We spent the next hour working side by side again, talking about soil types, sun exposure, and how stubborn squirrels can be. But the conversation wasn't just about gardening, it drifted. He told me about the woman he used to date, someone who didn't understand his love for quiet things. I told him about how I used to spend my Saturdays dancing in the living room with my late husband, just the two of us, an old jazz record playing in the background. It didn't feel like an age gap anymore. It felt like two people talking, seeing each other clearly. At one point, we stopped for lemonade. I poured it from a glass pitcher and handed him a tall, sweating glass. We sat on the bench beneath the oak tree, the air dappled with golden sunlight. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, not just physically, but in the way he listened, really listened to every word I said. He glanced at me after a long pause, his voice quieter now. "You know, when I was younger, I used to think you were the most graceful person in the neighborhood. You had this calm about you. It made the world feel less heavy." I wasn't sure what to say to that. It was the kind of thing you don't hear often, not at my age, not from a man like him. I looked down at my hands, the fine lines that traced my knuckles, the specks of dirt that hadn't quite come off. "Grace feels like something that belonged to a younger version of me," I said softly. "No," he replied, setting his glass down. "It's still there, maybe even more now." His words settled over me like a soft blanket, comforting and intimate. I felt my chest tighten, not with discomfort, but with something deeper recognition. Maybe, or longing, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a very long time. As the sun dipped lower, and the shadows stretched across the yard, he stood and helped me up from the bench. His hand lingered around mine just a second longer than necessary. It wasn't bold. It wasn't rushed. It just was. "I'll stop by next week," he said. "You better," I replied, smiling in spite of the storm of emotion stirring inside me. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet garden, the scent of tomato leaves on my fingers and the echo of his voice in my ears. There was something unfolding here, slow, steady, like the opening of a flower after a long winter. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I felt seen. The following week came with a change in the air, warmer, heavier. The kind of early summer heat that makes the petals on the hydrangeas droop by noon. I spent most mornings tending to the garden before the sun got too high, always keeping an eye on the gate, though I told myself not to. It was Friday when he returned. Later in the day, this time I had just come inside to rinse off the dirt, when I heard the soft creak of the gate swinging open. I stepped out onto the porch, drying my hands with a towel, and there he was, Tom, wearing a navy shirt that clung just a bit from the heat, holding a small brown paper bag. "Hope I'm not too late," he said. "I brought something." He pulled out a pair of small ceramic planters, painted by hand with tiny vines curling around their edges. "Made these myself, figured your lavender might like them." I stared at them, touched in a way I didn't expect. They weren't perfect. One had a little chip on the side, but they were beautiful, thoughtful, like him. "They're lovely," I said, running my fingers over the glaze. "No one's made something for me in a long time." We planted together in silence this time. There wasn't much left to say, and somehow that felt comforting. The kind of quiet that settles between people when they no longer need to fill every space with words. When we were done, I invited him. Inside, it wasn't something I planned, at least not consciously. But the sun was setting, and there was a golden light pouring through the windows that made everything feel softer. We stepped into the kitchen, the air cool and still. I poured us 2 glasses of iced tea, and we sat across from each other at the wooden table that still bore scratches from years of family dinners. His eyes roamed the room, pausing at the old framed photo of my husband and me on the mantel. "Do you miss him?" he asked gently. I didn't look away. "Every day, but it's different now. It's more like a part of me rather than a whole." He nodded slowly. "I think he'd be proud of the life you've made." That struck something deep. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. Instead, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. It was instinctive, not planned, but it felt right. He didn't pull away. The moment stretched between us, charged with a kind of electricity I hadn't felt in years. His thumb brushed across the back of my hand. Slow, deliberate. There was no urgency in it. No pressure. Just presence. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he said softly, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not," I replied, and meant it. He stood, came around the table, and gently pulled me to my feet. I looked up at him. This man so much younger than me, and yet somehow so grounded, so open. We stood close, the space between us dissolving until I could feel the warmth of his breath, the steady beat of his heart through his shirt. He leaned in, pausing just a breath away, and when our lips met, it wasn't like in the movies. It was slower, searching, as if both of us were afraid we'd imagined the moment. When we pulled apart, I didn't speak, neither did he. He held my gaze for a long moment, then pressed his forehead gently against mine. It was tender, real. We didn't do anything more that night. He stayed for another hour. We talked, laughed even, danced slowly in the kitchen when a song came on the radio. It was clumsy and sweet, and made me feel younger than I'd felt in decades. When he finally left, he kissed my cheek and promised to come back soon. After the door closed, I stood alone in the quiet of the house, but this time the silence felt different. It wasn't hollow. It was full of possibility. The following week, I found myself moving through my days with a quiet kind of anticipation. I baked more. I wore lipstick again, even just to pull weeds. I caught myself smiling at nothing, and my reflection in the mirror, while older, yes, looked softer somehow, like I was remembering something I had forgotten a long time ago. Tom came back on Sunday afternoon, no plants this time, no gloves or bags or tools, just him, wearing a simple button-down and jeans, his eyes warm when I opened the door. It struck me in that moment how natural this was becoming, how something that had started with dirt under our fingernails was now rooted in something deeper. "Thought I'd cook for you," he said, holding up a small basket of groceries. "You always feed me tea and kindness. I figured I'd return the favor." We cooked together, chopping vegetables, me stirring the sauce, music humming softly in the background. We moved around each other in the kitchen like we'd done it for years. He told me about a new landscaping job he'd started, how he'd recommended planting a garden designed specifically for older folks who couldn't kneel anymore. I could hear the thoughtfulness in his voice, and it made me feel proud to know him. When dinner was done, we ate on the back porch. The garden shimmered under the twilight sky, the marigolds now bright and full, the tomatoes standing tall in their stakes. The scent of basil and honeysuckle floated in the air, and a soft breeze moved through the trees. We didn't rush conversation. We didn't fill every silence. And when we finished eating, he leaned back in his chair, looking out over the yard like it was the most peaceful place on earth. "I didn't expect this," he said. "Us, whatever this is." Neither did I said, looking at him. But I'm glad it happened. He turned to face me fully, his expression open, unguarded. I know there's an age difference, I know how it must look. But none of that has changed how I feel when I'm with you. You make me feel steady, honest, seen. That word again, seen. I felt it land in my chest, heavier than it had before. I spent years thinking that part of my life was over, I said. Love, attraction, even just being noticed, I buried it under routines and safe choices. But then, you walked into my garden and everything shifted. He reached for my hand across the table and held it gently. No urgency, no performance, just a human connection. I don't know where this leads, he said, but I'd like to keep walking with you, wherever it goes. I didn't answer right away. I let myself feel the weight of his words, the truth of them, and then I smiled, soft, steady, like the wind in the trees. I'd like that too. As the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear, we stayed on the porch, holding hands and watching the fireflies rise like sparks from the earth. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't storybook, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing still. Watching life from the sidelines, I was in it, alive, with someone beside me who made the quiet feel full, future feel open, and the present, this sweet, surprising, unplanned moment, feel exactly right.